It's me, Jason Paul, and welcome to the Soul Sync, the place where your soul clocks in and your ego finally takes 5. It's the place where your inner voice gets the mic. So sit back, settle in, and it's lovely to have you here, my darlings. Hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. I'm medium Jason Paul and it's lovely to have you here with me. So in this two-part special it is today, we're going to be talking all about trance mediumship. Now, firstly, I'm going to say I absolutely love watching trance. It's one of the most beautiful forms of mediumship, and even just to sit in the trance energy is so healing. So I'm joined by medium Joe Rowley Flynn today. He's been on the podcast fairly recently, and in this deeper dive workshop style episode, Joe and I are going to be talking in the first part that you're listening to now all about trance and what it takes and how can you move into the altered states of consciousness and what that actually looks like. Now, Joe has a wonderful way of explaining things, firstly, especially the simplicity and how he keeps things simple when it comes to talking about mediumship, which is so important because mediumship, in its truest form, its essence, is simple. And we have, especially in the world now, we can overcomplicate things, firstly by even over-talking it. And Joe and I made so many wonderful points. So in the second episode, straight after this, you can go into the experience and listen to that as many times till your heart desires, and you'll probably find that when you listen to that, your experiences will change every single time. Now, trance is something that I want to develop a lot more because I really do believe it is the doorway that can just catapult your mediumship to the next level. So, as usual, it's an episode where I was making lots of notes because there was a lot of pearls of wisdom there. So, this is part 1, and enjoy. Hello, Joe Rowley Flynn. It's lovely to have you on.
Lovely to be here. Thank you, Jason. Lovely to see you again.
Do you know what? You came on the podcast about 6 months ago, and it was one of those episodes that always stays with me. And you're coming on today. Well, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to introduce it for you. It's almost a bit rude. But you're coming on to talk about a subject I just know is going to be so rich in tapestry. So, I'll let you introduce, what you're going to talk about for us on the podcast today.
Yes, of course. So what we're going to explore is a simplistic approach to the trance blending. So we'll be exploring that process of the blending and really looking at how we can change our perspective, because at times we get too caught up within the mind, don't we, within our mediumship all the time. The conscious mind, the nature of the mind, that becomes such a big problem for a lot of us. And so what I want to talk about is how we can really change the perspective within the blending to recognize that it's not as hard as we think it is, that our conscious mind thinks that it is. So that's what we're going to explore. And then after, I want to then do an exercise to just give everybody a chance to understand what it is that I'm sharing with them all.
I've often said that, and recently I've said that I feel that trance is such a good doorway into mediumship, and because it teaches you so much. And I've actually questioned to myself, Joe, should I have done, why didn't I get into trance first of all? If I'd done that, then my evidential mediumship would have been stronger. But I was never going to do that because my journey was about searching for proof of the spirit world. I needed the evidence. If I'd sat there, I don't think I'd have had the patience, quite frankly. But how did you come into, trance, firstly, for people listening to this? Was it straight away as your doorway in?
Yeah, I mean, I first came into spiritualism when I was 12 years old, so I was quite young. And it was really through meeting 2 well-known mediums around the local area that I then came across them. and they would just sit there and, say, hold this object, or, sit quietly and do all these things. And for a 12-year-old boy, thinking, what am I doing?
Well, exactly. Well, yes, I can imagine.
And I knew that there was things going on, but being that age and then being given that guidance at such an early age, I was really quite grateful for that. But the trance states happened for me when I was 16. I went into my first evidential circle, and it was a tiny little church that I went along to, and I was invited into the circle. And that was my first experience. When I sat within the altered state, the spirit world were there, and they started to entrance me, and they started to speak through me. And I wasn't particularly aware of what had happened or taken place. So it was a very unusual experience. And I actually pushed it away for quite a while because I thought, no, I don't want to do that. I want to focus on evidential. I want to focus on that. But the spirit world had other ideas and other plans, as they do. So that was my journey. And from the age of 16 all the way up, probably into my early 20s, I was, life took over. But I then had my home circle that I had for many years. And that was just sitting and understanding the importance of building the Trance Foundation. So it's progressed in more of a natural way for me, where I've sat with the spirit world and really just seen what is it that they want to do through me, and actually having others throughout that process that have been so kind to sit, every single week for my unfoldment and to help me. And it's coming from a place where you can let go and not feel judged or anything in that aspect, so that you can just relax and move into that flow. And we've had quite a lot of interesting experiences over the years, but that's really how that journey unfolded for me.
Well, I've now come to the belief in this stage of my development, and we'll talk about some of that in a moment with the trance, because it's interesting where I'm up to with the trance, and I think that some people will be able to relate to that. But spirit really are the best teacher, aren't they? Because you can spend all this time going to courses, but it's your relationship with them and how you perceive things. And you talked about, in that circle, in that moment, that first experience you had, what would you say you felt in that moment? Because some people are going to be listening to this, and I know we're going to go into that exercise a bit later, but what was it you felt? Because it felt to me that was a pinnacle moment, that something touched you where it changed the course of, your life, quite frankly, didn't it?
It did. I can honestly say that trance has followed me wherever I've gone. Let's put it that way. As much as I try and escape it, it comes back. So it's one of those where,
and that's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. Yes,
because we're not trying, then, are we? We're not trying to develop. We're just sitting and allowing to see what is it that the spirit world want to do with me, or through me, I should say. And that particular moment, it's hard to describe when you move into the trance states. Anybody that describes it, it's a very difficult thing to describe, because so many people will experience it in their own individual way. And for me, it was just this fading away very slowly of consciousness, and actually this feeling expanded, feeling this stronger presence joining me. But I didn't have any fear. I didn't have any, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And, it was a very loving, trusting experience for me. And to be honest, the spirit world, when we are relaxed and we don't expect it, that's when the experiences can naturally start to flow through the medium. And I feel, because I was within that altered state, within that moment, sitting in a circle, just sitting in the power, and it just allowed for that experience to unfold. And the teacher at that time could see what was going on, obviously, and unfolding. But we wasn't specifically sitting, to say, I'm now going to sit for trance, because that in itself sometimes puts an expectation. So for me, it was just a very natural experience that happened, and quite emotional, because a part of you is going, what's happened? You're aware that something's almost energetically moving through you. And there's this flow and fluidity of communication happening, but you're not really as present. And then you come back and you feel a little bit, oh, something happened there, but I'm not quite sure exactly everything that took place. And then you have all these people just staring at you, been watching, think what's gone on, what's happened. And really that's trance, it's a natural process. So that's really the way I can describe it.
Why? Because my experience of trance, and I'm going to talk about that because it leads me on to a point I want to ask you about. So I have been on a course for trance and I've tried to sit for trance, but my issue, I can tell you right now, is firstly trying. I'm sitting for trance. It's the expectation. It's the voice in my head that feels a bit silly, but I still can't shut down enough to say, just bloody speak, And then I, if I do it in an environment that's, in my comfy chair, when my legs are just at the right height, Joe, with me little blanket on,
Exactly.
Oh God, it takes me about 20 minutes to even get into the right position. I'm wasting so much time here. I could be so and I make light of it because, I would never say that I have spoken authentically, but and I want to do more trance, but there's something there in trusting enough. Why was you so trusting in that moment to allow yourself to go deep? Because it sounds like it was the childhood experiences that you had that allowed you in that moment to surrender enough. Because just on that point, when I love sitting in trance because I feel I'm getting a good blend. I can feel the spirit world with the intensity of it, but I just miss that eclipse window because I just don't trust enough. Or I feel like I'm being silly, Joe, and it's silly, isn't it? Because I know that's my next stage. I've asked you about 20 questions there, so unpack that as you will.
There's quite a few there. It's fine.
Yeah.
We'll multitask. Yeah, it's fine. So trust itself is one of the biggest things with linking to the spirit world. And I often refer back to our pioneers of our movement within spiritualism because there was a lot of trance happening back in those days, but also they had a very good understanding of who was there with them. From a very young age, they had their guides that would come close, draw close to them, and they built this bond up. Look at Mr. Gordon Higginson. There's been so many stories about him and the relationship of his guides within the war times and how they were telling him, don't go that way because there's going to be a bomb. You need to go this way. I mean, that requires a lot of trust. How far are we willing to go to explore the trust in the communication? And I feel that's an important part. So for me, really, from a young age, I was quite aware of the presence of someone from the other world joining me. And I always knew and felt that connection. I just knew on a soul level. And throughout my life, throughout my journey of developing, they then started to show themselves to me more. And I started to develop that trust and that bond with them. And that's when it then led from that trust and knowing who is there that works with me to then wanting to then explore more of the trance states. So what I always say whenever I'm teaching students or running circles, it's very important when you're developing the trance states that you have an understanding of who it is that works with you. And I'm not saying we need to know absolutely everything about them, absolutely not. But it's more the presence of getting to know them, which really connects on that soul level, which is different from your conscious mind where you don't actually trust. That trust, that not trusting is all from that conscious part. If we can change the awareness to be within the power of the soul, then we recognize that interconnected with the soul's awareness is the spirit world. They're not separate, they're there. And for me, there's certain individuals that have come to work with you for a purpose, for a reason, that are there. And whether we want to open our awareness to be aware of that, or whether they decide to do that, because it can also come in that way, it really is, first of all, the building block, getting to know how that feels. How do they make you feel when they come close into your space? How do you feel the presence of them? How do you know that that's somebody separate from your own self? And that's something, isn't it, that we always get very confused with. You know, are they there, or is this a part of me or my imagination? We're always doing that.
Oh, it's a nightmare. You know, it is a nightmare, and I say that because I've been there, and I feel like I am still there at times. And yeah, I give myself such a hard time, but I could go off on so many rabbit holes just about that. But even on that, there's something interesting, because the mind, even with the mental mediumship, the fact that you're getting evidence, confirmation, whatever, it's a different state, is the first thing,
Absolutely. And that brings me on to awareness. In mediumship, we learn about awareness. We have physical awareness, of everything around us in life. And it's a very chaotic world that we live within. We can't even make a cup of tea without having thoughts in our head and, things going on.
Well, I've had to start getting quite strict on my phone recently and turning off notifications. I went through and did an app cleanup. And the thing that they recently done on the iPhone, where it stays on now, just dim, always, just slightly and a glance away from your attention. I thought, no, I'm getting a case that I put it in now, because all of this stuff is not good. It's taking your attention.
It is. It is. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think technology, distraction, it brings in that distraction. But awareness, for me, is where we can start to change the perspective. For me, when we sit to blend, we spend far too much time trying to calm the mind. Trying to do this, that. But actually, if I was to say to you, Jason, just think about the other world just for one moment, and just relax and just breathe. And as you start to take that deep breath and you start to think about the other world, all of a sudden your awareness starts to change, and you actually start to feel how the spirit world feels with your connection. It's that simple. But we overcomplicate the process of the altered states. And so, I can feel that as I've been saying that. I can feel
it.
The spirit.
But
and
do you know what? This is funny, Joe. It is funny on that point, because I've, my journey of sitting, even now, I say, right, I'm going to sit. Okay, right, now I'm going to quiet my mind. Now I'm going to slow my breath down. Now I'm going to, my mind's popped. Oh, something's happened there. Right, now I'm going to do it. And you're constantly trying to do something. Yeah. And even now, I do that, and you fall into these traps. But the simplicity and how that felt, it's immediate, isn't it?
It is. And it's that simplistic. And if you think about this great school of philosophy, energy follows thought. And I love that, energy follows thought, because what you think, you then become that experience. And that's where you place your awareness and your attention. So if we're having thoughts of, I'm separate from the spirit world, I'm separate from the guide, I don't know this, I don't trust, all these things, that's all coming from that egoic cell. And really, it doesn't really exist. It's something that we are creating and conditioning within ourselves. And for me, what I've recognized is the spirit world, that they're very much here. They're in this present moment. And if we can learn to be more present and actually change our awareness, refocus our awareness to be on their presence, then we can start to feel that change, and we can start to experience the other world. And then what happens, you see, is we then get distracted. We then go back to the conscious mind, and it starts to go, down all these different experiences. So then what we've got to learn to do is just refocus. Just focus upon the presence of how you feel the spirit world joining you, how you feel the connection to your guide. And so for me, with the trance states, it's very much understand the presence of your guide. And the interesting thing with this is they're already interconnected with you, as I spoke about just a moment ago. They're already interconnected with you. It's just a changing of awareness. And it's actually about the power of the clairsentience that we need to open our awareness to with blending. And one thing I would say is if you're wanting to develop trance and you find it really difficult, sit within the healing energy. Because when you sit within the healing of self, what happens? You start to relax. You take the pressure off. You don't try. You're not trying to, push the mind and all of these things. You're just relaxing. And as you relax, as you learn the art of relaxation, your awareness naturally opens to the spirit world. And so our pioneers knew this. They knew that just sitting and just learning to be, create and to relax and take the pressure off and almost saying, here I am, spirit, do what is necessary. That then changes something. They kept it simple. So,
oh, I'm sitting here writing so many notes because you have such a beauty, Joe, of putting things, the power of words, even sit, within the healing of self. That's such a beautiful line. And energy does follow thought. If I strip it right back, if you want to know how to manifest, there you go. It
Exactly.
really is that simple,
Yeah.
It really is. And I wish, the amount of time I spent reading The Secret. What is The Secret? What is it? What is it? What is this great secret that the greats have had? But, it's in this world where we are more connected than ever. I must think to myself, when the spirit worlds are up there, look, there we go again. I'm separating it. In the spirit world, they must be looking at us. The more connected we're getting, the better the technical logical advantages, the more difficulty they're having probably getting through. It's, the irony of it, Joe.
We'll be right back.
Hello, I interrupt this episode for just a moment to ask that if you find this podcast helpful, please leave a review wherever you listen, because it helps these conversations reach others who may need them. Now enjoy the conversation.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, we don't often look at how is it from the spirit world's perspective? Once you've sat, do you ever, if you're developing your trance, if it's communication, and then afterwards you're then reflecting through the feedback that's being given, do you ever sit with your team and say, how is that for you? What do you need from me so that I can better connect with your world? Because we don't look enough at the self. We don't look enough at the energy. If you think about the auric field, it has those various layers: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And so if we look at those layers of the auric field and we take that time to look at how are we providing the power for the spirit world to be able to come and communicate in this way. And so that's why, for me, keeping a simplistic approach, the art of relaxation, that in itself, you're halfway there, because you're relaxing the body. And as you relax the body, you then start to relax the mind. And then as you move into the mind, you then start to change the awareness. And you just start to think about the spirit world, the love that you have for the spirit world and the love that they have for you. And then you move into the presence. And that's where it then starts to be created, this strength, this connection. But the problem we have is then we go back to the beginning because we get easily distracted. So for me, the importance is the power of the breath. And if you can bring the breath into what you're doing, you start to then fade into that beautiful presence and you start to embody more of the guide's presence over you. And that's where it starts to change. It's a very, very graceful surrender through the altered states, but it's dedication and practice that leads you to the experience. But you've got to get to know, who is it that's there? Developing that trust, understanding that they're separate from you, that there is an intelligence there. How are you going to create that relationship? That's important, because that's then how you can build the trust. Because you wouldn't go down the street and just meet a stranger for a coffee, would you? You would get to know them over time. And so as you get to know that person, you then start to trust them. And for me, if we can get the trust, if we can get the relationship right, then what follows is that deeper blending naturally starts to unfold.
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about, refocusing, there is something in that because, I remember, and when I've sat there at times in the early days, even now, something will happen. I will feel a sensation, from the spirit world. And I remember so many times when you're saying that, it's making me laugh because I'd think, right, I'm going to sit. Oh, I felt something there. Oh, it was nice. It was a nice feeling. And straight away, I'm up in my mind again, Oh, what was that? And, there's something about trust. Even at the beginning, I'd sit there with me 3 candles, Joe, lighting them, making sure that I had an odd number, put myself in me protection bubble and whatever it might be, just to make sure nothing nasty comes out the corner. But it's, I make light of it because we go through that stage. But, I love what you say about refocusing there, because you can even be hard on yourself when people start to sit to meditate and realize, but it's not easy. It is a discipline. It takes time. And especially if you've got, ADHD brain like me, your mind is so busy. And, at the very beginning, I thought, oh, am I ever going to be able to get my mind to be quiet? I used to think to myself, shut up, will you? Why are you still thinking again? It's, why can't you stop thinking about your dinner? What's wrong with you? So, the refocusing there is beautiful, and it's very simplistic, and I really like that. And especially asking your spirit team for feedback. At times I feel I need to be doing a lot more of that. Recently I've been doing that and really developing my relationship with my spirit team more. I burst out laughing because I have realised recently that my granddad is one of my guides, and he made me laugh because the spirit world gives me something. You might show me, Joe, a sun lounger. Instead of saying a sun lounger, I'd say, oh, it's a nice sunny day. I could, rather playing it. And I think, and the spirit world must be there. And my granddad said to me, why are you doing this? Why is it we give you one thing and you say another? And it's difficult because in any other aspect of our life, we go up into our mind. But this is all about, when you was talking about how to get... if you're going to focus on anything, focus on how you feel. Because you've got to give the mind at the start a job, haven't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really that changing of the perspective. It's the changing of the awareness. And so as you start to think about the spirit world, as you start to really just think about those that love you and that connection, it's automatically there. And so it's learning to feel with your sensitivity. Some people that may be difficult. They may find it difficult to open their awareness to feeling. But if you can even just go for a walk in nature and actually just for a moment, look at everything around, look at the tree, look at the sky, start to observation. What that's doing is it starts to give your mind something to do. But also you start to see more, you start to recognize more, and then you start to feel how these experiences are making you feel. And so that sensitivity starts to open. When you're with somebody, you may get a sense or a feel about them, and maybe a psychic impression or a feeling. So that all of that sensitivity comes from the power of the soul. And so really it's about us recognizing our own connection to power. And that's a big topic because, the power has been overcomplicated over the years, hasn't it? But if you think about it, it's so natural. It's been something that's been there since existence, really. We are power. We are love. Our true essence is love. So we've got to learn how it works for us and how we can learn to calm the mind so that it can move into this realm of sensitivity, feeling, emotion. And that's why I say, just put that thought out and ask one of your loved ones to come close. It doesn't have to be a guide. It can even be somebody's loved one or your loved one. How does that start to feel? What do you start to recognize? And then it's just moving into that awareness within the blending. Because for me, the foundation of blending is the clairsentience. And if we can unfold the power of the clairsentience, for me, we've got that lovely solar plexus. Gordon Higginson used to talk about the solar plexus being the seat of the soul. And, you know, that was where power was built. And so if we can learn to understand the feeling, if we can learn to recognize how to develop that, then we start to move on a different level. We start to allow that.
On the point of feeling, and you talk about the solar plexus, you know.
Yes.
To some people, and to me, even at times, it's making me smile again, you know. Right, okay, I'm going to see how I feel now. Oh, no, I'm thinking again. I'm not feeling. I'm thinking, I'm not feeling. To some people, how do you, you know, let's talk about the solar plexus for a moment, given its importance, because how does someone at the very, you know, beginning of this journey even, you know, be able to differentiate, right, okay, of course I know what I feel, but, you know, now I've felt something, and should I be thinking or feeling, and where am I?
Yeah.
It's complicated, isn't it? Because it's so individual.
Process. Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. We all experience in different ways. Do you know what? Developing healing to start with, a lot of our mediums of the past worked from there because they were learning how to understand the auric field. They were learning how to understand energy, how to sit there and somebody else give healing. And all of a sudden they start to be aware of what energy is. So first of all, if you're new to it, understand what you are. You're not a body within a spirit. It's the other way round. And so the mind has tricked you into thinking for many years.
Oh,
you know, that it really does, doesn't it?
And many people never realise the truth until they go back to the other world, and then they look back and realise that actually I spent my whole life in, you know, not living in a way that, you know, is the truth.
Yeah. But I think the solar plexus, you know, there's loads of different exercises, and some people very much will say, just drop your mind down to be within the soul awareness of the solar plexus. But I think it's interesting because I've been observing.
But that feels in itself, even on that point, like drop your awareness. You're trying to do something now.
Exactly.
Yes, which is again, I need to drop down, you know.
And it's almost creating that separation. But actually, you already are that presence. But what I would say that is doing, for some people, that may work because it's giving them a focus within their awareness. And so, you know, it's just thought. If you start to sit and you naturally start to just contemplate on nature, if you start to contemplate on love, if you start to contemplate on a memory where there was that sensitivity of a hug, or we felt something within that moment, what does that do to the auric field? It starts to expand it. And actually, we start to enjoy sitting. And one way that we can learn to feel is by experiencing joy. And actually, it's a fantastic way to develop the trance states because you're learning to exist within the moment. You're learning to enjoy your sitting. And so we get into this habit of not enjoying at all. And, oh, God, I can't sit, I can't do this, I can't do that. But if you learn to enjoy what you do, you're creating that vibration. So if you sit and you start to contemplate on all these things, it starts to raise the vibration. But what it's doing is it's just changing your awareness to recognize all that you actually are. And so as you focus on those things, that vibration starts to lift. That energy starts to be felt. You know, another way, a psychic exercise that a lot of people do is feeling into somebody else's energy, standing behind them and creating that contact to feel, what do you feel about that person? How
Well,
what
the
is it
problem
that
is
pick up
if you're
about
developing this and you're sitting opposite someone where you gut feelings telling you I shouldn't be with them, it exposes a lot of things, doesn't it, when you are developing this, because it is a journey of self, and
Yeah.
when you're developing, any of these faculties, it's going to transform your life in one way or another, because it's all you.
It's-
You are the channel, and
Exactly.
if you're clogged up with a load of
absolutely.
emotional, garbage, like a lot of us are, it's, it's going to cause issues, isn't it, in one way or another? So
It is.
we've talked a lot about how one might go about starting to explore the trance state, and you mentioned about trance healing, and believe it or not, people who listen to this podcast get in touch all the time in far-flung places. I say far-flung places. I do apologise to you in these lovely places, but very, in remote places in the world where they haven't got someone, perhaps, that's willing to sit in front of them and experiment with this stuff. And the beauty of this episode today is you're going to actually take us in a moment on an experience on a separate episode where you're going to walk us into something in a moment, and it's going to be beautiful, and it will be able to be played several times.
So as Joe and I just told you, the trance, the presence is already there. Experience awaits you. All you need to do is to click on the next episode. And most importantly, my dears, you do not need to do anything. Just sit, be, and relax.